What happens if tomorrow night at the State of the Union, Donald Trump announces that he is pulling the U.S. out of NATO? Earlier today, Trump suspended funding to Ukraine, funding that has already been appropriated by Congress, until Zelensky apologizes to him in a way that he feels is personally satisfactory. But tomorrow night, can he pull us out of NATO? Legally, no. Back in 2020, Congress added a special provision to the National Defense Authorization Act. This section is called Section 1250A, and it explicitly says that the president cannot pull the United States out of NATO. This requires that the president address Congress and the Senate, which he is doing tomorrow night, and gives them 180 days notice to his intent to pull out of NATO. During that 180 days, the president must consult with the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate and the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House. And for us to actually leave NATO, it would take a 2/3 vote in the Senate to pass. And he does not have nearly the 2/3 vote in the Senate to pull out of NATO that he would need to do such a thing. Doesn't mean he's not going to try, right? This man has done a bunch of unconstitutional and questionably legal stuff so far. So that's where we're at with funding for Ukraine and the NATO situation. And in Why'd You Do That news, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has decided that he's going to rename Fort Moore Fort Benning again. But of course, this Fort Benning doesn't honor the Confederate soldier Benning that the base was originally named for. It honors this other guy Benning, a World War I soldier. Fort Moore was not part of some woke bullshit thing that they renamed bases for. Fort Moore was named for Lieutenant General Hal Moore and his wife, Julia. The Moore family is maybe the most iconic Army family, and Lieutenant General Hal Moore was the most decorated Vietnam veteran. And his wife, Julia, is the reason why we have Gold Star family networks. You see, when a service member used to be killed in action, a telegram would be delivered by a taxi driver to the surviving family. And Julia Moore said, that's just not the way that we should be treating soldiers who fall in battle. She's the one who came up with the idea of sending uniformed service members to the family's home to let them know that their loved one had fallen. She was also responsible for setting up a lot of the support services and grief services that are offered to Gold Star families. They are buried at Fort Moore. I shot my first gun at Fort Moore. I did a day at jump school at Fort Moore. General Buzzard is the one who taught me all of this history and what it means to be more. We should not accept this renaming. I don't know what to do yet, but I'm going to work on it with some of my Army buddies and see if there's a way that we can preserve Fort Moore and not have Pete Hegseth just absolutely shit on the Moore family legacy.